I want to welcome all of you to our inaugural poll grading and poll training for the Ridley Township Dems. And just really want to thank you for your time tonight that you're dedicating your evening to this, and also for everything you've done for us in the past, and also for working Election Day. My name is Jen Rieger-Murphy, and I am joined by my colleague Bella Engelbach. We are both going to be co-presenting tonight. We are committee members of the Democratic Ridley Township Dems, and we consider ourselves to be seasoned poll graders and poll watchers. We both have been doing this for about 4 years within Ridley, and I've been previously involved in other committees and election days prior to moving to Ridley 5 years ago. A couple housekeeping items. As you know, we are recording this event primarily so that you can revisit this in the future if you need to, and also to send this out to anyone that wasn't able to make it tonight so we can reach as many Democrats as possible. There is going to be a decent amount of text on some of these slides, which I know is usually an oh no, but we did this intentionally so that we could also print this out and have it as a reference copy at the polling locations on Election Day. So we wanted to have as much information as possible. Before we get started with today's agenda, Bella and I wanted to get a poll of our audience to see how many of you are first-time poll greeters or poll watchers, and how many of you are returning. So if you wouldn't mind just putting in the chat box if you are new here, or if you've been with us before. I know I see a lot of familiar faces, so I think we have a lot of returners. Great. Oh, nice. Oh, wow. Some first timers experience. This is great. Awesome. Very nice.
Margaret says Margaret and Ed have worked before. That's an understatement.
Yes. Very nice. Well, we're hoping that everyone, regardless of their experience, gets something out of this, including those that have done this before. You can certainly contribute to the Q&A session and offer your insight and experience. And Bella and I are looking to learn new things too, because there's always something that you can learn from these. So thank you all for being here, the new and the returners. Our agenda tonight is to cover 2 different areas. I'll be covering the poll grading and going over all the details that entails. We'll break for a Q&A and for comments and feedback, and then we'll go into poll watching with Bella. The reason we've structured it this way is because if you are assigned to be a poll watcher, you can also go in and out of the polls and be a poll greeter. So we wanted to cover the common denominator of poll greeting first, and then move on to poll watching. Now, if you've been assigned to poll greeting and you want to stick around for the poll watching portion, we certainly welcome that, because that's an opportunity where maybe you'll be interested in that in the future, and we can have you doing poll watching at another election time. So you're welcome to stay for as much of this as you can. But if you're a poll greeter and you're done with the Q&A, you're welcome to leave at that time if you'd like. So we'll go to the next slide. So basically, we'll talk about like the pre-election day setup. We'll go over the greeter goals first. So basically, you know, we're looking for the friendly faces of the Democratic Party. You are a representative of everybody in the party, including the candidates that day. So we've recruited the friendliest people that we know. We know you'll all be smiling and welcoming faces to all the voters that day. And we really do mean that. We want you to be a welcoming presence to all voters. We know that not everyone is going to vote for Democrats, but we really want to be friendly and pleasant with everyone there. We want to invite people to a sample Democratic ballot, which we'll review later in more detail. We offer the coveted I voted stickers. Those are very popular. If you've worked an election before, you know that people love to get the I voted stickers. And we do recommend giving them to all voters who are exiting the polls, even if they haven't voted for our candidates. We are also there to answer questions for people and help direct them to other people if we don't know the answer. We're not expecting anyone here to know everything. I don't know everything, and I don't expect you to either. But we're really meant to be there as a resource for people. And I'll get into the calls that sometimes we make. We're not going to be doing that this time, but I will allude to that so that if you are interested in calling voters on Election Day, we can potentially have you do that angle in future elections. This is a picture of me and my good friend Mary Beth, who's going to be working the polls with me as well. We're calling voters, reminding them that they still need to come out and we really need their vote. One thing I want to just share anecdotally is one time when I was asking someone if they would be a greeter, they said, well, what kind of difference can I make? People know who they're voting for. What's the point of being there? And I really wanted to convey how important it is. Just having worked 5 election years, I know this to be true, that poll greeting is very essential to what we do, and it's very valued. When I started doing the polls, I was the only Democratic greeter, and there were 7 Republican greeters. So for some Democratic voters, that was quite intimidating. And thanks to people like you who come back and are starting anew to greet, we are building our base and we have more people to greet them. And you wouldn't believe the value of someone coming up to you and saying, thank God you're here. It's so nice to see a Democrat giving this information out. So never underestimate the value of your contribution and your time that day. It's really important. We'll go to the next slide. In terms of pre-election prep, we want you to be comfortable. So prepare for the elements. I work 14 hours that day, so I bring a lot of things with me to keep me comfortable. You might be working a 2-hour shift and you might not need as much, but we recommend that you wear comfortable, presentable clothing, comfortable shoes. I wear nice jeans and sneakers, so that's okay. Some people come in suits and that's okay if that's your thing, but we want you to be comfortable. We want you to think about the elements, so prep for that. If you're going to be working maybe for 4 or 5 hours and it calls for rain, you want to bring an umbrella with you. I bring sunscreen in the summer and things like that. So just bring what's going to make you comfortable. We also recommend if you need to be sitting, you might need that. And if you have a portable chair, please bring it. We always staff with at least 2 chairs at each polling area, but if you definitely rely on that and have one, I would say have it in your car when you come, just as a backup. I have low blood sugar, so I bring lots of snacks and beverages that will keep me going throughout the day. You might have a 2-hour shift and that might not be as essential to you. And then the different polling places will have, to greater or lesser extent, some variation of food and beverage. So just keep that in mind when you're planning your day. You might want to bring something for downtime, especially if you're doing a longer stint of the day, maybe a book or a crossword puzzle or something like that. The weather for Tuesday is supposed to be a high of 61 and partly cloudy, so just plan accordingly. I want to point out in this picture, this light that I purchased, and it was thanks to a greeter like you. My greeter, Donna, who comes every single year, had the night shift, and she brought one of her awesome camping lights. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a great idea. So I went out and purchased one, and I bring that with me on election day. And when I'm doing social media, encouraging people to come out and vote, I tell them I'm leaving the light on for them. So it really does make a difference. So if you think of things like that and you have those resources, feel free to bring them with you. It really does make a difference.
And Jen, if I could just add something, as you're listening to Jen, if you have questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat, and that will make sure that when we get to the Q&A, we'll address all of the questions.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, so, we're not asking you to be experts in everything that's on the ballot, but we want to give you some information just to orient you to what you might be seeing that day. So first and foremost, thanks to Margaret Mansfield, who is the person that finds all of our talented greeters. She has probably provided you with your polling location and your assignment, but we will have some slides in a short while where we'll show you where all of those locations are. So we'll give you that. And then we want to familiarize you with what you'll see on the ballot. Now, I'm assuming all of you are regular voters, so you probably know all of these things, but just for anyone that might be less familiar, these are the types of candidates that you might see on a ballot. And I've highlighted the ones in yellow that you'll see on November 2nd. So in a given race, you might see candidates at the township level, the municipal level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level. The more exciting races that we see a lot of turnout in is the federal, with the House of Representatives, Senate, and President. But this municipal election is really important because it affects everyone locally. So you'll see candidates running for school board, or what they call school director, commissioner, or what is equivalent to a borough council member, the magistrate, and then at the county level, you'll see county council, the different judges and courtships, the sheriff is up for re-election. We have the register of wills and the county controller. And then we have some judges that are running at the state level. And as everyone on this call probably knows, it's very, very important for our judges to get elected. So these are very important positions. And then we also have some ballot questions that we'll go into more detail in a few slides, but this is just to orient you to the types of positions that are on the ballot on Tuesday. And we have included a link here, which is a place where if you wanted to just out of curiosity kind of poke around, you could go there and find all the different sample ballots for the municipal elections in our township and in yours if you are outside of Ridley. So as I mentioned, there are different polling locations and you probably have your assignment. In Ridley Township, we have 9 different wards, and you can notice the ward by looking at the first number in the left-hand column. So we have wards 1 through 4 here, and then the number following the dash is the precinct. So in some cases, you might have 2 or 3 precincts in one ward. In some cases, you will have the same polling location for some of these precincts. Like for instance, 1-1 and 1-3 are both at the same location at the Knights of Columbus. Not something you have to know or memorize, just trying to orient people to the different locations here. And then on the second slide, we have a list of our wards 5 through 9. I represent Ward 6, so you'll see that 6-1 and 6-2 are also in the same building, so that you may find that your polling place has 2 different polls available, and the way they differentiate it, my poll specifically, is they have 2 different entrances for 6-1 and 6-2. So we talked about who was on the ballot, what types of positions are running. I've listed them out again here, but what I really wanted to draw your attention to is just like what the actual ballot looks like. And these are small images, but what I wanted to orient you to is the fact that there are 3 different pages here. The first 2 are identified with the letter A in the top right-hand column, and that's to signify that it's a front and back ballot. And then the second one, that's a separate page, are the ballot questions that the voters will be filling out. You may have already seen this if you've done a vote by mail already, but this is just to kind of give you some additional information. We'll go to the next slide. So here I wanted to point out just how the candidates are positioned on the ballot. In Ridley Township and in Delaware County at large, the county council is controlled, the majority party is the Democrats. So you'll see in each of these different categories, these are all the different positions that people are running for. You'll see that the Democrats are actually positioned first if they are running in an election. So you'll see the DEM, which signifies Democrat, and the REP, which signals Republican. What I wanted to point out to you, and this is not something you necessarily have to be telling every voter, but just so that you're aware, in this particular ballot for 6-2, which is where I work, the polling place, the second picture in the right-hand column, which is a little smaller, shows races that are running. If you could just go back one slide.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's showing you uncontested races. So you'll see that for controller, we have Christopher Belzer. He's a Republican. He's running unopposed. The same with the tax collector and the constable. So it's really up to Democrats if they want to vote for Republicans. That's up to them. The thing I wanted to draw your attention to is that in the tax collector box, you'll see that this person, Kevin Jennings, actually has a Dem and a Rep next to his name. I believe that means he had cross-filed in the primary. So if somebody goes in and doesn't know who he truly is, they might say, oh, he's a Democrat, I'm going to vote for him. And that plays into a larger issue that we have with our school board candidates. If you look in the first picture to the left, the last position you can vote for is school director. People can vote for 4 people in this category. We only have 3 Democrats running. We have Kayla, Michael, and Rich. Adele Warner is listed as a Dem and Republican because she also cross-filed. So what we're really trying to get out to voters, if we're engaging and talking with them, is to point out that we're really recommending they only vote for the top 3 Democrats, Kayla, Michael, and Rich. Adele is not a Democrat, she cross-filed. The reason we don't want to vote for any Republicans is because they're going to elect the top 4 vote getters. And if you have Democrats voting for Adele and you have Republicans voting for Adele, you're going to definitely knock out one of our candidates. So If a voter comes up to me on election day and they're engaged with me, I'm going to say, hey, I just want to point out that we're asking people to vote for Kayla, Michael, and Rich, and that's going to be on the sample ballot. We want to make sure that they're not voting for anyone else in that category. So just wanted to point that out. And this is why poll grading is so important, because if you weren't there, people might not know this. So the ballot question we also want to address, this is another thing we want to point out to voters. So this is a retention question. This is basically asking, do we want to retain these 7 judges? So they're asking specifically in each box, do you want to retain this judge? Do you want to retain this judge? We're recommending that they say no to all of them. The reason is they're all Republican judges, and you're basically saying, we're just going to retain them for another term. We want to essentially be able to say that they should run for re-election, and we should try to find Democratic candidates to run against them. If you're voting yes, that means you're saying, yeah, let's retain them. I'm not sure what the term says. I believe it's outlined probably in the fine print there, but we're basically going to recommend to any voter that's willing to talk to us that they vote no on those questions. So we've done some pre-election orientation, pre-election day prep. What I want to get to next is the poll grading setup. So especially for anyone that's new, generally when you go to a polling location, I think 99% of them are going to be outside, which is why we do want you to prepare for the elements. We will have a table and usually 2 chairs. You'll see a lot of lawn signs out advertising the different candidates. We have sample ballots that will show you that look different than the ballots we just looked at. Those were the actual ballots people will use to vote. There will be candidate information on tables. So the different campaigns may provide literature to us so that we can give that to voters as they go in. It's also a nice way to brush up on different talking points and what their platforms are if you care to look into that further. We have the I voted stickers that'll be on the table. We're also doing a volunteer sign up form, but I really want to point out how crucial this next point is. We're not going to encourage everyone and their mother to come and sign up for this form. This form is really only going to be meant for people that come up to our table and they're like, I'm so excited to talk to you. I want to get involved. If you're talking to someone and they seem really interested, you can ask them if they're interested in potentially getting involved, but we shouldn't be asking, unlike asking everyone if they want a sample ballot, we should not be asking everyone if they want to sign up. And the reason being is that could be misconstrued as voter intimidation and being aggressive. So we don't want to come off that way. And I know that would be no one's intention, but we just kind of want to play that one as cool as possible. Definitely engage with someone that seems really interested, but we're not looking to we'd love to have as many volunteers as possible, but we just, we want to make sure that people are really interested in coming up to us and us not like going out to them. We will not have strike lists this year. I don't know if everyone has heard of strike lists, but they're basically lists that committee members can print out, and they list everybody that's registered to vote in their polling place. And poll watchers who are working inside the polls have certificates, and they're allowed to look at the voter rolls and to see who has come in and voted. And I'm one of those people. I can go in during a lull of election day when nobody's coming in and using the book, and I can look and cross out people who I see have voted. And then I can go outside and potentially call the people that haven't come in yet and, say, hey, a reminder, like we really need you to come in and vote. The polls are open till 8 p.m. Please make a plan to vote. So if any of you like to talk on the phone, like to engage with people, we would love for you to get in touch with Margaret and let her know, because I think in future elections, this will be really impactful to just, get people out. It's easy enough to forget to do something, right? We all do it. Oh, I forgot to do this. I forgot to do that. We don't want people to forget to vote. So if you're interested in doing that, that would be awesome. Just let us know. If you're new to greeting, you probably don't know this, but greeters have to be at least 10 feet away from the entrance to the polling place. Again, we don't want to appear intimidating to voters, so we do have to stand a bit of a distance from the polls. If you don't know where that line is, the judge of elections can definitely identify that for you, but most times when you're coming to a polling place, you're going to have someone else that's been there already that'll know where that line is. If you are going into the polls for any reason, you may need to use the restroom. They may say, hey, we have food in there if you want to go grab something, or plug in your phone and charge it. That's all fine as long as we're not interrupting the process of voting. The other thing that you'll have to remember to do is to remove any candidate material. So if you're wearing a button that says vote for Joe, you need to take it off before you go in. If you're wearing a shirt that has a candidate on it, you need to either turn it inside out or have a sweater covering it. Voters, it's a whole different game. They can go in and they can wear any shirts or buttons they want, but we cannot go in with any materials on our person, or they have to be covered. So just keep that in mind. I had one lady that had to turn her shirt inside out because she didn't have a covering otherwise, but you know, it happens. So just keep that in mind. And then lastly, we just want to make sure that we're always providing a clear path to the voters. Sometimes we get excited. We might run up and say, hey, do you want to, vote for some Democrats today? We just need to make sure that we're not appearing to be in anyone's way, because sometimes people might take that to be a sign of aggression or intimidation. So we just always want to make sure the pathway is clear. If it ever happens that it's not, or it's interpreted as a blockage, the judge of elections might come out and just remind people of that, but don't take it too personally. It's happened before. It's rare, but if that happens, don't, it's just to be mindful that we want to create a welcoming environment and not appear to be getting in anyone's way. So as I mentioned, the ballots that we're giving out as samples are a little bit different, and that's because we had to print a lot of them and we need space. If you looked at the other ballot, it's front and back plus another page. That would be a big print job. So basically what we've done for efficiency is to create a list that just says, here are the Democrats of the day, please vote for them. So that's why they do look different. They're only going to show positions where we have candidates running. So as I showed you in my initial sample, some of the positions that people are running for in my precinct and ward are Republican only. So you're not going to see anyone on this list for that. And we'll go over some of the instances where Democrats are running in those kinds of positions. This ballot says vote straight Democratic. I just want to point out what we mean by that is we want you to potentially vote for only Democrats that day. We don't have straight party voting in Pennsylvania anymore. And while I think everyone on the call has probably voted since that law came into effect, we have to remember that not everyone that's voting may have voted since previous to that. So again, this goes back to voter education. They might say, hey, is that button still there that I can just say ding and I'm done? That's not a thing anymore. So just a reminder that we don't have straight party voting. And then, as I mentioned before, there will be other positions on the ballot where the other party is running uncontested. So we can go to the next slide, and I think we have an example. Okay, it'll be the following one, but we'll go through this. So this is a printout that we'll have on the desks outside the polling places. This is just another list of our endorsed candidates. A reminder that we're asking you to point out to voters, please only vote for the 3 Democrats for school board. And that's, you can see that in a different color in blue. Again, we don't want to be voting for Adele Warner because she is a Republican. And just a reminder that we want to point out no on the retention of judges. If I had 2 seconds to talk to a voter, those are the 2 things I would mention to them. That's really important. So here's an example of some Democrats who are on select ballots. So what that means is they're not running county or township wide. They're running in just certain wards. So if you've been assigned to ward 2, 3, 5, 7, or 8, you will see that Frank Redding is running for magistrate. This is a nice opportunity to promote Frank because first of all, he's very qualified for the position and he has a real shot at which is really exciting. So if you're working in any of those areas, I would definitely mention Frank's name because I can guarantee you the Republicans are going to be very much pushing the other candidate. When you see a contested race in a specific area, you'll see them really pushing that candidate. So it's very important to be mentioning Frank's name. Dan Corcoran, I believe, is on this call. He is running for commissioner in Ward 2, which is really exciting. So we hope for good turnout for him. And then Janet Diorio is running for commissioner in Ward 8. So if you're working in any of those areas, you'll see their names. You might see their faces. They might be at those polling locations. So definitely promote them any chance that you can. So we have a couple more slides left. Thanks for bearing with us. Who are you going to see on election day? Lots of different kinds of folks. We have the voters, obviously, and those are the most exciting, especially when they bring their kids with them. And I know a woman who's bringing her son for the first time. He's turning 18 on election day, so it's his birthday, and he's going to vote for the first time. So it's really a celebratory day, especially to just to see everybody out and voting. You may see candidates. So you're going to see Frank at his polling locations, I'm sure. You'll see Dan and you'll see Janet. You may not know everyone by face, but they'll certainly come up and introduce you. I know the school board candidates will probably be circulating as well. You should only be seeing them outside the polls. The poll watchers will be making sure that no candidates are inside the polls. They're not really supposed to be in there because it's considered politicking. So I was a poll watcher once and saw a Republican come in and bring everyone donuts. And that was really nice because she wanted to thank everyone. But I kind of waited and I thought I'm going to give her a couple of seconds. And if she doesn't leave, I'm going to have to ask her to leave. So you will see candidates, but you should only be seeing them outside the polls. You'll also see the Republican greeters, as I mentioned. So they'll be there. Usually they're kind of like on the opposite side of the sidewalk. Sometimes they mix, we talk, we get, in my polling place, we get along. Others might be a little bit contentious, but for the most part, I think people do get along that day. So that's nice. You may see candidate greeters. So you may see people that are specifically out to promote Frank in his area. You might see someone specifically out to promote Dan or Janet. Or school board candidates. So just keep that in mind. They might just be there just to hand out that literature, and that's perfectly fine. You will also maybe see briefly judge of elections or poll workers or watchers. So as a poll watcher, you would, if you were working with me in 6-1, you would see me coming in and out of the polls quite regularly because I can do that. Poll workers, less so. They might come out for a quick break or some fresh air, but for the most part, they are inside for much of the day. And then lastly, you may see lawyers for election protection. This is more common during a federal election for, Congress or the presidency. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw them on election day, though. They may just come up to you and say, hey, have you noticed anything unusual about today? Are there long lines? Does it look like anyone's being turned away? They just want to basically make sure everything is running smoothly. So they may come and ask you some questions. They're most likely going to be looking to talk to the judge of elections or the poll workers, but they've asked poll greeters as well. So that's, you may interact with some lawyers as well. Okay, so this is just a brief rundown of who works inside the polling place. So we have the judge of elections. They kind of oversee everything. They are elected by people in their community to oversee the activities of the day, including all the poll workers that are inside. They open and close the polls, and they conduct all the paperwork. They set up the equipment, and then they make sure all the supplies are returned to the county very late at night. So they do a lot of work on election day. We then have 2 inspectors, usually one that's assigned by the majority party, and those are elected positions as well. They can be appointed, but people do run for these positions. The inspectors oversee the sign-in books when voters come in and sign in. And as voters, you've seen all of these people probably as well. With the new paper ballots, they also help distribute the ballots to the voters. Then we have the clerks who assist those inspectors. So they oversee the book where they're listing those the voters as they come in order. So this is the person that I tend to talk to when I'm looking, or I look at the books that they're using to kind of determine who I can strike off my voter list. We have machine inspectors that assure that things are running properly with the machines and that they're overseeing the scanning operations, and they assist voters in maintaining their privacy as they vote. And then lastly, we have the poll watchers. They have certificates to be in those polling places, and they observe, they're just another set of eyes to make sure that everything is running smoothly. All of these people work with the judge of elections, so they tend to try to have a good relationship with everybody in the room just to make sure that we're all, in there for the right reasons and making sure everyone is being taken care of. Some things that poll watchers may look out for is to make sure that no candidates are in the polling place and then they're not lingering there. Police officers are generally only in the polling place when voting, unless the judge of elections has asked them to be present to preserve the peace. And then, we're looking to make sure that no one's turned away from voting without proper resources. So if someone comes in and says, I'm not sure if I'm at the right place, the judge of elections will look to determine where they need to be. The judge of elections will also help them with any questions about voting. And then we do have a link here just for your reference that kind of goes over these in a little bit more detail. So this is like the big important slide, and I hope that we can, I don't know if we still have our Rose Valley folks, but they'll get this in the recording. But the sample greeting techniques, this is a big thing. So when I started, I used to say, hello, would you like a sample ballot? And I realized I had to refine that pretty quickly. Generally, it's good to say what ballot you're giving them. So I would start by saying, good morning, would you like a sample Democratic ballot? It's great because it identifies your party affiliation immediately, and it kind of gives you an idea of where you stand with these people, the voters. So a voter might come up and, you know, say, no, thanks, I'm good. Or somebody will be like, thank God you're here. And then they'll get into the questions that they have with you. The other thing I've used in the past is, would you like to vote for some Democrats today? This kind of signifies to voters that they don't have to always vote within their party, especially in a general election. So sometimes I'll have people say, oh, I can't, I'm a registered Republican. And then I say, well, you can actually vote for some Democrats today if you want. It's a general election. So sometimes people genuinely don't know that. And that's, again, why greeting is so crucial. And then other times they're just trying to be polite and get out of it, which is fine. So I've never really had anyone be dismissive or mean. Most are polite. They'll either say, you know, accept it or not, and some just take it, and I don't know what they do with it. But it is nice because it's telling the voter like who you are and what you're representing, and that's helpful because it can get you to the next step, especially if they want to talk to you about the Democratic candidates. One thing to keep in mind, and I've seen this happen, even if a Republican greeter offers a ballot to someone, it doesn't mean they're Republican. Don't assume that. I have very friendly Republican greeters, and sometimes when I look at the interactions they have with voters, I would almost assume they're voting that party. And I've been wrong, because when I say, would you like a sample Democratic ballot, the guy comes up to me and says, thank you so much. That's what I wanted to have. You know, they're being polite to both. So you can't assume by the interaction you're witnessing with someone that they're in that party. So just never leave a voter behind and assume that they're with the other party. If you're, again, just another reminder, because it's so crucial, if you are able to speak with a voter and they're going to give you a couple seconds, I would definitely point out, above all else, we're recommending that you only vote for the 3 Democratic school board members and no one else. And we are recommending that people vote no to the retention questions of all the judges. And again, because they're all Republican, and we'd like to have some Democrats run against them in the next election. And then, you know, lastly, as another, it's not really a technique, but just a reminder, we like to give everyone the I voted sticker. It's a nice way to end that experience for them for the day. Okay, I think we have 2 more slides for poll greeting. So the top questions that we get, and I'd love to hear in the Q&A what you guys have heard, but the top questions are, is this my polling location? You don't need to know the answer to that. The judge of elections or someone in the polling place can always be the one to answer that for them, but I like to direct people to vote411.org. So they could look it up on their phone while they're talking to you. You could look it up for them. It's a nice thing to give them for future reference because they type in their address. It shows them where their polling location is, who's on their ballot. In a lot of cases, it'll give you a lot of candidate information. So it's a really good resource to have. Again, you're not responsible to have the answers to everything, but this is just another tool for your toolbox for that day. The other question sometimes we get is, do I need an ID to vote? You only need one if it's your first time voting at that polling place. So if you recently moved, that might be an example of when you would use it, but that's really the only reason if it's your first time. There is a picture to the right here that shows you the different forms of identification. Again, you don't need to know this information. The judge of elections will have this, but if you wanted to brush up on it, there's different photo IDs that people can use. And then there's also non-photo identification, like a current utility bill is one that comes to mind that I think people have used, as long as it has your address and name on it. Another question we've gotten is, I have my mail-in ballot with me. Can I drop it off here? The answer is no. In the very first election where we were doing this, there were boxes in the polling places. That was a one-time thing. We do have a link here that will show you where those locations are, and I believe we'll probably have a printout at the polling location as well. So they have two options here. They can drop it off in a Dropbox location in their security envelope and their return envelope. They have to submit it by 8 p.m. that night. I've had people that come up to me and they're like, I don't want to do that. So their other option is to go into their polling location, surrender their mail-in ballot and their return envelopes, and vote provisionally. So I've seen that process happen. It doesn't take too long. So they really have both of those options. So again, you know, these are just things to just kind of be mindful of. Other people that you can ask these questions of, other poll greeters who are returners may know the answers to some of these. If you don't, the other people that will know them or look into it for them are the poll workers inside. So just know that you don't have to know all the answers of the day, but this is just some of the common questions that we've seen when we're poll greeting. Last slide for poll greeting. So just generally, you know, sometimes we have people say, well, who can I vote for? And we've seen that when we offer Democratic ballots and a Republican says, I can't vote for Democrats, I'm a Republican. There are two different, depending on what kind of election we're in, will determine who they can vote for. So during a primary in Pennsylvania, we have what's called a closed primary, which means that people within their party can only vote for people within their party to promote their candidates to the general election. So in a closed primary, you have Republicans voting primarily for Republican candidates and Democrats voting for Democratic candidates. Independents and other party members can't really vote that day unless there are ballot questions, which are fair game to anyone. So in our last primary, we had a couple of ballot questions, one being, can Governor Wolf have emergency declaration powers? Anyone that came to that primary could vote on those questions, but an independent could not vote for a Republican or a Democrat. There's one outlier to that, and that's cross-filing. So judge positions and school board candidates can cross-file. So that's an area where poll greeting is essential, because sometimes if you're not aware of that as a voter, you might go in thinking you're just voting in a closed primary for people within your party. The judgeships and the school board candidates are positions where we have to clarify, like, these are the true Democrats. So again, poll greeting is essential for those kinds of election days. And then we have our general election, which will be in November. So it'll be on Tuesday, and it's fair game. People can vote for whoever they want that's on the ballot. So that's just the differences between the two. So we've made it. We've done poll greeting. Thanks for sticking with us. We want to take this moment, first of all, to thank you for coming, and also just to open it up for questions, comments. I know I saw people writing in the chat, so we can definitely start tackling those questions. But any thoughts or feedback?
Yeah, so let's start with the question that's in the chat, and then we can ask people to raise their hand if they have another question. And that is a question about masking rules for voters inside. And the answer to that, which was put in the chat from Margaret Mansfield, thanks Margaret, was that according to the election board, the poll workers need to wear masks, but voters have a choice as to whether they wear masks or not. And then we had a follow-up question about should greeters wear masks outside? And I would say, you know, the answer to that is what are you comfortable with? If you normally wear a mask outside, wear a mask outside. If you are comfortable not wearing a mask outside, and particularly if you're going to be there for a long day, you know, at least according to the CDC guidance, you do not need to wear a mask outside. So, okay. Are there other questions? So raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask another question.
Voting no on retention. At our Swarthmore Dems meeting, we were told that it's just always been standard practice you vote yes on retention, that we don't fight about that. That if you want, you can vote no. Do the Delco Dems themselves have a specific recommendation, or is that just left up to the different committees?
That's a great question. I believe I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but I believe the Delco Dems did not have an endorsement one way or the other, but I think they left it up to the committees. And I think Ridley Township as a committee would like to promote voting no on that. Do you know, Bella or Margaret, if that's the case?
Jennifer? Jen?
Yes.
That's Ruth Ann.
I can answer that.
Okay. Oh, hi, Ruth Ann. I'm sorry I didn't see you.
That's all right. I just put my video on. Hi, everybody. Thank you for volunteering. I'm the chair of the Ridley Township Democratic Committee. And basically Christine Ruther, she's one of the council members, and she's the chair of another province. She suggested that we recommend voting no, because just to make a statement, because they're going to get reelected anyway. They're going to get retained anyway. But we don't have to just keep voting yes, just because that's the only option, really. Saying no will say, no, we want a chance to elect Democrats. So the idea is to say, to vote no.
Can I
Impact of something.
can I make a further comment on that?
Of course.
It's Diane Lehan. Just as an aside, I can't speak to the state judicial candidates in terms of judges and retention, but all of the common pleas candidates for Court of Common Pleas in Delaware County that are up for retention are all Republicans. Why would we vote to retain them? So on my personal ballot that I sent in this week, I voted no on retention for all the county common pleas judges because they're all Republicans.
Every judge on that list is a Republican this year.
Okay, thank you. Good, because I voted no for all of them.
Diane, you had your hand up. Was there some other comment that you wanted to make or a question?
Well, there were actually two. One was answered about the retention, and the other was, I just wanted to make a comment. As a lot of people know, I've been doing this since I was 16. And my first comment or suggestion to anyone that's new at working at a polling place, give yourself an hour or maybe even two to get the lay of the land, find out how you're going to be received by the Republicans, before you make any snap judgments. I more often than not have had new people come into a polling place that don't know everyone and start making decisions and complaining about stuff, and it just doesn't work that way. See how people get along. See if some will get along with you, some will not. I agree with the presentation, but give yourself a little chance to get the lay of the land. And if you have any questions or if you suspect something is going on, call. If you're in Ridley, call Ruth Ann. Otherwise, there will be a sheet with the election room where there will be lawyers that will be able to answer your questions. So, before you jump in with 2 feet and say things or try to, correct things, make sure you give yourself a little bit of time to get to know what's going on. And then if you have questions, please call those election lawyers. They have the best answers available. That was it.
Thanks.
So I have a question. I'm sorry, I came in a little late. I don't know what I missed, but I'm not going to worry about it because it's probably fine. But I'm supposed to be a poll watcher. And you mentioned that there are things like the candidates aren't supposed to be in the polls and police officers aren't supposed to be there unless they're voting. What do we do if we see something like that happening? What's the action to take? Do we talk to them? Do we talk to the judge of elections? What's the proper thing to do?
So for me, I would talk to the judge of elections first as the poll watcher. And to kind of piggyback off what Diane said is I generally go in, I know my judge of elections now, but like for the first time when I went and showed her my poll watcher certificate. I introduced myself. You want to establish a good rapport with them because they are the point people there. So I would start by talking to them and saying, I am a little concerned that this police officer is still here. I thought he was only here to vote. Can you verify that? It could be seen as intimidation. and see what they say to that. Same is true of the candidates. I generally try to give a tiny bit of leeway. Like when that lady was bringing in donuts, I thought, okay, I'm going to give her like another minute. And then if she doesn't leave, I'm going to talk to the judge of elections. I would probably go right to the judge and let them handle it. I've never had a bad experience I've never had to say ask any of those questions, but I've never had a bad feeling about working with my judge of elections. And hopefully no one will have that experience. But I believe if you're finding that the judge is dismissive of it, then that's when you need to escalate that. And Ruth Ann, I believe they would want to call election protection. You'd want to go outside. If you're making any phone calls, you want to go outside to do that and call. We also, for poll watchers specifically, will have a call tree. It's like a text messaging system so we can all communicate. And that's another way where we could say, hey, this just happened to me. What should I do next? So that you're not alone making that decision. Ruth Ann is a good resource. And then we will have in the poll watcher packets, we will have numbers that you can call as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Jen, do you know anything about constables in election polling places?
I guess I assumed they were similar to police because what I read in the poll watcher notes that they had from the Delco Dems was kind of a similar thing. If they're there, if they're asked to be there by the judge of elections to preserve order or the peace, then that is okay. But if they're kind of just in there, just talking it up, then, you know, it's kind of a concern, I think.
So I always understood that that constables were the only ones that were to be called. In other words, if you're having some kind of issue like a fight, which has happened at polling places, you're not supposed to call the cops. You are supposed to call the local constable. That's who's supposed to handle those issues. Just so people know that. I mean, it happens rarely. It happens exceedingly rarely, but it has happened. Now, not every town has a constable. So, you know, if you know who your constable is.
We do have constables in Ridley Township. I would add to that, though, Diane, if you feel that people are really in danger and you feel that 911 needs to be called, I wouldn't hold back from calling 911. I mean,
I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that that's always been my understanding of the legal process, is that you're supposed to call constables. If you don't have constables, call a cop. I mean, if it's getting out of hand, we've had that happen in Jerry Lawrence's precinct, where actually a fist fight broke out, and they had to call the constable and the cops because the constable couldn't handle it.
So Jen Pfluger.
So we're gonna answer some of the poll watcher questions in a minute when we get to the poll watcher slides. I know that Jennifer Pfluger's had a hand up for a long time. So Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm a greeter and I'm doing the 7 a.m. shift. And so I'm just wondering what time we should arrive. And it sounds like, Jennifer, you guys are pretty organized. So does that mean the tables and literature will be all set up by then, or should we be arriving early to help with that?
That's a really great question, and I thank you for that, because it's something we should put in our slides for the future. I generally, I man the polls at Leadham Elementary, so I'm there usually around 6:15, 6:30, setting everything up. So usually I'm all set up for my poll greeters when they get there at 7. I generally recommend maybe coming, if they can, at 6:45, 6:30, depending on how big we think the turnout is going to be or how busy we get. But I think, you know, closer to 7 is fine. I would maybe check in with Margaret, because I think she has Margaret, you probably have a better sense of which polling places are staffed. I would imagine most are staffed by that point and set up, but
right?
I'm sorry?
Jen, that's fine. Ed just made a comment. This is Mark.
Okay.
I will just say that everybody's going to get an email that identifies who's going to be at your polling place. And there will be some places where if you're on the first shift, I've said 6:45.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And
thanks for getting up early to help with that.
I'd also like to just give due credit to Casey Cole, who has done a fantastic job of staffing the polls this year. So
yes.
Just it's not just me who's done it, and Ruth Ann also. So thank you very much, both Casey and Ruth Ann. And Rose Valley folk as well. So
Thank
Yeah, so
you.
give everyone give jazz hands for Margaret and for and for Casey. There was one more question in the chat, and that was about Ridley Township. Is it predominantly Republican or Democratic? And the answer is that right now it is still predominantly Republican by registration. It's changing. And when we have Democratic greeters at the polling places, that helps the people who would perhaps like to register Democratic feel more confident about their ability perhaps to change their registration. So it's another reason why all of our work is very important.
Right.
So are we ready now to move ahead with the poll watcher piece of it? So I am going to now, who's that? Jen, I'm going to keep you on camera and go ahead and share the screen. So if you are a poll greeter, you're very, very welcome to continue watching this part. And again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. All right. So as we just said, the Ridley Township has been predominantly Republican for a long time. So one of the things that we do sometimes see at the polls is things you might construe as partisan behavior. This might be because some of our Republican poll watchers and poll greeters are just not used to having Democrats around, and they just kind of feel like they're used to running things the way that they want to run them. But we actually would like to see less partisan behavior. And the members of the election board, that is the judge of elections and the clerks and all of the poll workers, even though they are registered to specific parties, they are supposed to be. So they may not be engaging in partisan behavior inside or outside the polls, such as advocating for a candidate during the hours of the election. We were just talking about constables. Constables, like police, may only enter the polling place at the request of the judge of elections. And as Diane said, that may be because there's, unfortunately, some situation they need to deal with. And they themselves may not serve as greeters. So we want to put, some of the things that we want to pay attention for. A constable will be dressed in uniforms. You will be able to tell that they're a constable, just as you will be able to tell a uniformed police officer. So here are some of the things that you might see as a poll watcher. First of all, you might possibly see partisan check-in tables. So this is not the table where the poll workers are sitting, taking people's names and checking ID if they're a first-time voter at that location and handing out ballots. This is a table where people are being asked to provide information to a party as they're checking in. And as Jen said, that's not permitted. So we don't want to collect information, and we would not expect the Republicans to do that either. This may be because they're creating strike lists. I don't know that I've seen this happen, but it's possible, but it could happen. If people are being told you're not on the list, maybe you're at the wrong polling place, that would be something that you would want to listen for. So actually, both for poll watchers and for poll greeters, in addition to looking at things, it's a good idea to keep an ear out and listen and see what people are saying. Is there a gauntlet or a tight line of greeters in front of the polling place? Again, this is something I think that some of our opposing party members have done, because in the past they have kind of owned that polling place. They've been the only people there, and they're used to being the people standing right in front of the door. So if it appears as if it is difficult for people to get in, or they have to run through a gauntlet of greeters, that is something that could be construed as intimidation. So the entrances should be clear enough so that people don't feel intimidated or harassed. And is there any other behavior going on that is or might be perceived as harassing or threatening to voters? And this is very important for our Democratic voters, some of whom in Ridley Township are still a little bit concerned about going to the polls and essentially being outed as a Democrat. The polls may be crowded inside. They won't be as crowded inside as they were last November. But you want to keep an eye on who is inside the polling place and does everyone in there belong in there? There are a lot of people, as Jen said in one of the previous slides, who could be in there, but does everyone in there really belong in there? Do they have a legitimate reason for being in there? Is there space for social distancing? And is there anything odd or improper? So these are some of the things that the poll watchers need to be keeping an eye on. But that doesn't mean that the poll watchers should be inside all day. We really, really need people to be greeting. Greeting is the most important thing. And keeping an eye on this stuff would be secondary unless you're really concerned that something is going on that shouldn't be going on. Another thing you want to pay attention to is that no voter should be turned away. Everyone who turns up to vote should be allowed to at least have a provisional ballot. So if somebody comes out and you hear them say, I wasn't allowed to vote, it is not a bad idea to have a conversation with them and find out what happened. It may be that they just were at the wrong polling place, and as Jen said, helping them identify where their polling place is if the judge of elections hasn't done that is something that you can do that is helpful. But if somebody is really turned away, they should at least get a provisional ballot. And this is something that you can talk to the judge of elections about if you need to. Sometimes people would have had a vote by ballot, and they have turned it in, but they perhaps they may be on the list of registered voters. It doesn't matter what the situation is, they must be allowed to vote at least by provisional ballot. If they're told they're not the correct polling place, as Jen said, there are ways that you can help them do that. You would help them find that with Votes 411. There's another website, which is a specifically Pennsylvania website. And Jen, we were going to update this slide and we didn't. But there are ways to help people find their polling place. And if you do use Vote Builder or Minivan, you can also help them with that. All right. As Jen said, only first-time voters at that specific polling place need a voter ID. One of the things that you can do both as a greeter and a watcher is if you see someone going in and they're super excited because it's their very first time voting. I see this sometimes with the 18-year-olds. It's actually a good idea to say to them, this is fantastic. Welcome to voting. Did you bring your ID? And I've seen more than one teenager turn around and go home to get their ID. And the list of ID is actually is here and is also on a previous slide. And actually here is, actually that's not the right link. We apologize for that. If somebody is absolutely not registered to vote, you can also encourage them to vote on the Pennsylvania State Department website. Right. So this is one of the most important things that you can do to help us assure a safe election, and that is a secure election. And that is, if you're a poll watcher, is to be present when the polls are closed. This is when the machines are turned off, the reports from the machines are printed out and they're examined, and you have the opportunity to actually receive a printout, a tape from the machine that lists all of the votes. And the reason that this is important is that were anything to happen, we would have, as a committee, we would have a record of what actually occurred at that polling place. So we do want to collect at least one copy of the tape, and the judge of elections is required to give it to you. They will print out 6 copies of the tapes, and you should be able to take one. And Ruth Ann would like to receive the tapes or to get a picture of the tapes, to get a photo of the tapes. And then so if anything untoward happens afterwards, we have documentation. The total number of voters recorded by the election clerk should match the sum of totals in the machine. So if it says there were 400 voters, if the book says there were 400 voters, there should be 400 voters recorded on that tape. And so this would be, if that's the case, if that is not the case, this would definitely be something to call the election protection hotline about. You want to pay attention as the count is tallied. I don't know how it is at the other polling places, but the judge of elections at my polling place and the poll workers are still getting used to the machines and how it all works, and they only get to do it once every 6 months. So it may take a little while for them to do it. They may want to work slowly and carefully, and that would be the right thing to do. You should be paying attention. If they say that there are any discrepancies, they also have to account for the number of ballots that they received and were all the ballots were they used, how many are returned. So your attention at closing is very, very important. Yeah, and these are the tallies. Yes. As I said, you should insist on receiving at least one of those tapes. If there is somebody else there who is also from the Ridley committee, you don't both need them, but at least one person should get them. And once the whole thing is complete, they should take the tapes and actually post them at the polling place so that the public could see them as well. They usually don't stay up long. If it's a public place, they will usually only stay up about 24 hours. Okay. For those of you who have been doing this for a while, you probably know this, but absentee ballots from a precinct used to be counted on election day. They are not counted because of our vote by mail. They are not counted at the precinct. They are counted at the county election center because they have already been submitted directly to the county. Activities that are allowed inside or near the polls, I think we've covered most of this. So the only people really who should be inside are the election board officials, voters, and people holding poll watcher certificates. If you are concerned that somebody's in there a lot, and you may ask if they have a poll watcher certificate, but actually they only have to show it to the judge of elections. So if you're very concerned, you can ask the judge of elections to ask that person. The enforcement of this is generally up to the judge of elections. If you see conduct that's improper and the judge of elections is refusing to fix it, then you can call the election protection line. You'll have actually a list of numbers to call. As we discussed previously, it's probably a good idea to start out by reaching out to the people on the, is it WhatsApp that we're using, Jen? I can't remember. Yeah, and let Ruth Ann know. If you're a poll watcher and you haven't been invited to that list, I think you can, Jen will be happy to add you to the list so you get the texts on election day. So it's really about knowing that you're not alone. There are people to back you up. The judge of elections should be neutral, should be willing to support any concerns that you have. And if they're not, then you would start to escalate. Again, members of the people who are supposed to be neutral should not be wearing any candidate or party gear. Voters should not voice support for candidates to others once inside the polling place, inside that 10-foot zone. If you're outside, you're not going to hear that, right? But if you're inside, you might hear somebody mention that. And again, As we mentioned, an attempt to request voter information, particularly during those sort of on-site strike lists, can be construed as intimidation, and the Joe could enforce not doing that. Assistance. So this slide is about people who are physically unable to vote on their own. So a voter who is not able to perhaps read the ballot or fill out the ballot on their own may request assistance. The Joe may not assist somebody with filling out the ballot. If there are union leaders in there, apparently they can assist voters either. Committee people and other elected officials may assist unless they're running for election. So you might possibly be asked to assist somebody. I've never had this happen. I don't know if anybody else has had it happen. When somebody receives assistance, that should be noted in the polling book, as well as the name of the person assisting. Watchers may not sit at the table with the Joe or other members of the. I've never seen a Joe actually sit down. They're usually on their feet the entire day. But workers may not sit with the other poll workers. But you can go in, as Jen said, you can go in and you can ask how many people have voted so far. You can go in and if you have a moment, actually look at the names. We're not doing strike lists, so you don't need to do that now. We do like to know throughout the day just how many people have voted. It is possible for you to stand in there and do a strike off. But whatever you do, you really should not be interfering with what the poll workers are doing. They're busy, they have a long day, and you really should not be interfering. Again, you can call election protection. You will have a list of numbers to call. You have to be outside the polling place to call. There is also a form that you will receive that you can fill out. If you do see an issue, you can actually document the issue on the form. So that will be in with your materials if you need it. There's also a phone version that I've seen. So that to document issues. If you need to call the election protection, they ask you not to leave a voicemail. The reason there's a list of numbers is if one person is busy, you can then try another person. They may not get back to responding to all the voicemails. And here is the Delco Voter Registration Office, Delco Election Board Office. You can find all of the information on the county website, and then this is the new website to replace votespower.com. Somebody in the chat did say that website is still working. Votespower.com is still working. This is the new website that we're asking the people should be using. And if you need it, this is the number for Delco Dems headquarters, but call Ruth Ann first. And this is the incident report. If you need it, hopefully you'll never need it. And thank you. Thank you for serving. And it's your work that makes this happen, and that will help to make, as Casey likes to say, will help to turn Ridley blue as people start to feel more and more comfortable registering as Democrats and coming out to the poll and voting as Democrats, because we know they're here. We just need your help to get them out.
Yeah.
So thanks, and we will now take any final questions. So if you need to be on the group me chat, there's Jen's email, Jennifer_Riga@yahoo.com.
And just to note, you'll actually have to download the app. Whether you have Android or an iPhone, you have to go to Group Me to then get on the group messaging. I will start adding people either Sunday night or Monday night. So if you give me your cell phone now, you won't see a message from me in the app until Sunday or Monday, because people tend to start saying hi to each other and then you see all the group texts. So we're just going to try to, cut down on that and just kind of start it closer to election day. So
It is
start
helpful.
getting
It is
lots of
helpful.
notifications.
It is helpful once you're on there to identify who you are and what name is associated with what phone number. Otherwise, you only see phone numbers. All right. So I see Diane has a hand up and Linda Price has a question. So Diane.
Bella, that second to the last slide
Yeah.
that you had up that had all of those websites on it, is there some way you can send that out to us? I was trying to write them down and you kind of went through it real quick. If there was some way you could email it, or I don't know what would be a good way. I, for one, would like to have that list. I don't know about anybody else.
The deck's going to go out.
Yeah, I think we're going to include all the links with the recording just so people can click on them.
And
Okay,
then,
thank you.
and then also in the email that's going out to all poll watchers and poll greeters, that information will be on that email. And I'm hoping that you'll receive it on Saturday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. All right. So Linda Price asks, she says she's from New York. No constables. What is the job responsibility of constables? Are they police? So they are technically a form of police, but they're not a member of the police department. Does anyone know what a constable actually does? I only see them on election day.
I was a constable. They're actually they're servants of the court. They serve various different warrants and collections and that kind of thing.
And Ruth Ann was about to say something. I'll simply add, they are elected. And at least at my polling place, they are very pally-pally with the Republican commissioner and the Republican head of our precinct, and often stand right next to the door. And I've had difficulty with the constable who comes to 4-2. And I just want to say, they're not supposed to hang out for a long time and talk and chat. So sometimes I just go up and say, it looks pretty peaceful here. And they get the idea and leave.
Hands on their guns.
So poll watchers, I would say, it is not likely that you will have that circumstance at your poll. I have had it at mine because of the particular constable who comes every year. And he knows me and I know him. So it is, I would recommend that if you see something that disturbs you, that you go to the judge of elections directly and say, the constable is standing right in front of the door. I've noticed some people sort of back up and not want to enter. Just kind of mention that and ask the judge to do something. And if the judge doesn't, and it really bothers you, you can call for election protection.
Thanks, Margaret. And I think the other thing just to really pay attention to this year, because it is a municipal election, is that, and Jen, so you mentioned that your commissioner is also a candidate this year. So there are I think half the commissioners are candidates. So the commissioner who is a candidate, even though they used to hanging around the polling place, should not be inside and should not have a poll watcher certificate. So that would be something to pay attention to. And because they're a candidate, they may be wearing a badge, that's with their name on it, so they can introduce themselves to people. So that would be just something to really pay attention to. I know at my polling place Amosland School, that the Ridley Township Fire Marshal is one of the people running for constable. So he should not be in there twice. He should not be in there as a candidate unless he's voting, and he should not be in there as a constable unless he's voting. And Jennifer Fluger says she's worked multiple precincts in Delco with constable hovering intimidation issues.
I have to say, I haven't seen, except for Margaret's precinct, I haven't seen any issues with the constables, except like she says, they hang around with the Republicans. But ours are pretty friendly.
All right, so are there any other questions? I'm just checking to see if there's any other hand raised.
Linda Preiser has her hand up.
Again, I'm from New York, so please excuse my ignorance, but I don't quite understand why a constable there is intimidating to people. Could you explain that a little bit more? What's the intimidation from?
They are an armed, uniformed police
they're
officer.
armed and uniformed. Okay. And just that being said, that may be intimidating to some people, just being armed and uniformed.
Well, armed and uniformed, and then, as Margaret said, hanging out with the Republicans who were greeting it near the door, which the Republicans are likely to do. So that combination would be quite unnerving. And again, so one of the things to recognize about Ridley Township is that this is a township where people for many, many years registered Republican, even if their political leanings were not Republican, because there was a belief that if you registered Democrat or even independent, you wouldn't be able to get your permit approved for renovations on your house, or that other untoward things would happen to you. And so there are many people here who vote Democratic who are registered Republican, and there are many people who are registered Republican who would be preferred to register Democratic, but they don't know that it's safe to do so.
Thank you for the explanation. Appreciate it.
And Heather Saunders says it's their job to track down people with open warrants who owe money to the court. So maybe if you have a voter who owes money to the court, they might be intimidated for good reason.
I just want to say one more thing. The tapes at the end of the night, going inside. Frank Radian is running for magistrate, and he's going to have some poll watchers at the polls. So if there is a poll watcher with you at the end of the night and they are requesting a tape, if you could ask the judge of elections to give them a tape as well, they should be able to do that without a problem. And just because candidates are allowed to have poll watchers. So they should be allowed to have a tape as well. I just wanted to give you a heads up so you won't wonder who this person is asking for another tape.
The judge of elections should be requesting to see people's certificates before they go ahead and close and go through the work of closing the polls. So you should also have the opportunity to see this person's in there for a legitimate reason.
Right.
It's also not a bad idea, sorry, to, as a poll watcher, when you come in to the polls, go in to the judge of elections, introduce yourself, and show your certificate and say, if you're the person closing, I'll be the one who comes in to ask for the tapes, and just kind of take away the question of who's the minority, who's the, representative who is allowed to get the tapes.
Which reminds me of one other little quick tip. If you are there at the end of the day, you may also be involved in packing up the table and things like that. Don't focus on that to the point that you are locked out of the building when they go to close the polls. Make sure you are inside the building before 8 o'clock. Any other questions? Well, I think that we have gone through everything at least twice, so. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming.